In Module 3, Lesson 4, we'll be adding fractions with sums between 1 and 2. We will be working with the fraction 1/2 plus 3/4 equals like. And you can tell that this fraction is going to be greater than 1 whole because your 3/4 is greater than a half, and a half plus half is equal to 1 whole. So you're going to have at least 1 whole plus a little bit more. To solve this addition of fractions, we're going to use the same steps from Lesson 3. So first we want to draw our rectangular fraction models. And we want to remember that one of the fractions we want to use vertical parts, and the other fraction we want to use horizontal parts. So the first fraction, 1/2, I have 2 wholes, or 2 parts in my whole. So I'm going to create my 2 parts, and then I know the one on top means how many I have, so I'm going to shade that in to show how many I have. Then in my second fraction, my denominator here is 4, so that means I'm going to have 4 equal sized parts in my whole. And we're going to try to get them as close to equal as possible, but if they're not perfect, that's okay as long as we know what they are supposed to be. And then the 3, the numerator on top, tells me how many parts that I have, and I have 3, so I'm going to color in 3 holes here. And so I can say that this is 3 parts out of 4, or 3/4, and this is 1 part out of 2 parts, which is also called 1/2. So in the step 2, now we need to create our like denominators because we can't add unlike denominators like we were talking about students and teachers. We first need to change them into something that is similar, like people. So in thinking about that, we ask ourselves, how can we partition our wholes to be equal fractional units? And the strategy that we tried was taking the line from one rectangular fraction unit and putting it in the other one. And since there's only one line down the middle of my first, I'll put that in my second, and then I'll take a look at my horizontal lines. I have 1, 2, 3 to make 4 parts, and I put them in on this side. Okay, and if you'll notice, the amount or the area of shaded parts that I have didn't change. We just changed how many parts are in that whole. So now we want to go to writing our new addition sentence. So we have here our new whole parts is 8. And in this 1/2, I now have 4 parts out of 8, or 4/8, and I'm adding that to my other rectangular fraction unit, which also has 8 parts. So I now have like denominators, or common denominators, and I have 6 out of the 8 parts. So my new sentence, or my new addition equation, is 4/8 plus 6/8. And then when we solve, we just add across. So 6 and plus 4 is 10 out of 8 parts. And remember, we're not changing the size of our whole, so we don't add our denominators. Now this is where it gets interesting, and what's new about Lesson 4 is if you take a look here, we have 8 parts in our whole, but we've colored in 10 parts. So what we have to ask ourselves is, do we have to add another whole? And what I mean by that is, if we have our whole in our answer, and our whole has 8 parts in it, like we've broken up our other 2 fractions into, and I'm taking those parts that I have from my other 2 fractions, so 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'm coloring those in my whole, and I say, okay, I've taken these 4 from my first one, and I'll use an X to show what I've taken. So I've taken this one, I've taken this one, and that one, so there's 4. And now I take from my second one, so I'll do 1, 2, I'll color those in. 1, 2. And then I'll take my next two. 1, 2. And then color those in my hole. And what you'll notice here is after I get to 8 holes, I still have 2 parts left to add in to my holes, but I don't have any space left in my hole. And what that means is that you need to create another hole so that you can add in those extra parts. So I draw my another hole, 8 parts, same as my first one, and then I'll take these 2 remaining parts and I'll put them into my new, or my second hole. So 1, 2. So if you count up how many parts I have, it should still be 10. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And the parts in my hole is still 8. I just have 2 holes. So what that would look like is, I'm going to erase this, is if we take what we know about holes and we're looking at this first hole here, we have 8 parts in our hole and 8 of those parts are filled in. And 8 parts over 8 equals 1. Remember? And then if we take over here, we still have 8 parts in our hole and we have 2 parts filled in. So that would be still equal to 2/8. So my answer, when I combine these two, would be 1 and 2/8. So step 5 is what I just showed you, and you kind of ask yourself, do I need to make another hole? Is my numerator bigger than my denominator? And if the answer is yes, then you add another hole, same size part, same denominator, and you fill that in with the extra parts that you have left over from your addition sentence. And the answer is what we would call a mixed number, because you have a whole number in your 1 or however many holes you have, and then you have a fraction. So mixed number is when you have a combination of whole numbers and fractions to equal the number that you're looking for. And so if you wanted to show this here, we have 10/8, which is a true answer up here, is equal to 1 and 2/8. Same thing. And one way you could look at this is you ask yourselves how many 8s could be in that 10, and the answer is 1, which you get that from here. And then for your fractional part, you have how many left over once you minus the 8, and that's 2. Now the other thing that we talked about is creating our lowest fraction or biggest fractional pieces. And for up here, we can ask ourselves, can I erase any lines to make equal fractional parts? And I can erase this middle line and keep the fractional parts down to 1/4, and I still have one of my fourths filled up. So I could also say that it equals 1 and 1/4. So this fraction 10/8 can be written in these two different ways, 1 and 2/8 or 1 and 1/4.